This is Alfred Weber, and I'm with Laura Magdalene Eisenhower, and we're just having a conversation here. It's been a while since Laura has been with Exopolitics TV. Laura, thank you very much for joining us.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
You know, one of the subjects that I know that's very much on your mind and on the mind of most of us is that of the ecology and of the environment. And a news item came out recently that the US military, the Department of Defense, was the largest polluter on the planet. And there's been some indication, I know that uh, a, um, a leading atmospheric scientist told me 5 years ago that he thought that the tipping point had been reached where our ecology was near to collapse. And you express this in terms of the divine feminine and the assault on Gaia, the living planet. And I wondered if you could talk about this for us.
Yeah, and this also relates to ETs and just an incredible manipulation that has been in our history, rooted really, I guess one could say around the time of Eden and even before that, based on archetypes and where one is, looking at the galactic core or source energy and how there's the aeons, which are like messengers, and, dimensional frequencies that are very much in the pleroma and an aspect of the higher light and higher consciousness, and then there's the archons, the lower alien races that have emerged from there. And so there's been kind of a competition, and in this competition, it's sort of what's created religion. It's what's created the power structures. It's what's created this desire to make us powerless, and in trying to convince us that there's forces out there that are helpful, including religion, including just the powers that, like our president, and I'm not saying anything specifically about Obama, but just the government in general, those that are taking care of our society and those that are supposed to be looking out for us are attached and being informed by these lower entities. Not everybody's affected, but a lot are being sort of led astray, and good people even who aren't aware of this. And so the root of this manipulation is to conquer nature, to conquer Gaia. And we see this play out, in our society and in the way that men and women relate and in the way that, the system has been set up in what one might call patriarchy, but it's not about the male energy. It's just about this false power that is archonic. And you can't blame it on a gender because these, masculine and feminine is within us, but the main goal is really to overtake the universe and to have complete and total control. And the assault is especially, reaching more and more extremes when people are awakening, because that's the last thing they have. Before, it was easy because people were, looking to a savior, to a Christ figure. They were going to church, believing in God as in a faith, as in something separate. So that gave them power. And now that people are realizing that, there's this force within us, and it's not about separation. It's a whole other avenue for them to find a way to assault it, to take it down, to affect us, and to poison us in a way, and make us feel that we are dealing with, an environment that is falling apart, that is not at the hands of man or alien agendas, but just, the way it is, and it's a lot deeper than that. So there's just so much more I could say on the subject, but I just want to take a breath of it if you have anything.
Right. No, so there's a lot there that you talked about. Uh, one thing seems to be sort of like there's almost a struggle between light and dark, or forces of light and dark built in to the universe or to our reality in terms of the upper forces or the the higher self directed forces and the lower forces. And in terms of this being an age of enlightened unity consciousness coming in, that's associated with light, so that there's universal force that's coming in now uh, that is dealing with this false matrix that you talk about.
right? And so we see that this power structure is looking at any possible way to insult and infect and keep this sort of duality going. And when we're looking at this, we want to take responsibility because it's easy to fall into victimhood. It's easy to get really paralyzed by it, and I'm sure we all struggle with this daily. Um, and at the same time, we have to realize that the fact that these incredible dualities have sort of emerged, free will has given one the ability to decide how they're going to play with it. But we're dealing with the free will of this archonic agenda that chose to try and do this and take a lot of very vulnerable and innocent minds and sweep them into this power game that they have. So it really has robbed people's free will. It robs their soul. It robs their light. So we're not really dealing with real free will. We're dealing with entities that have chosen to take this route, and rooted in the fact that after the time of Eden or at some deep point in ancient history, the Illuminati branched out and started to use behavior modification and mind control to control the masses because there was, kind of an agreement, almost like an agreement with, the dark forces of ultimate power and the ability to control and just have, the technologies to be able to harness energy and get one's, just have ultimate power. And then the other was, it has been exiled, not only the goddess energy, but the idea and the concept of gnosis, of self-realization, of awakening to the God-goddess within. And so in these manipulations and insults on that kind of level, our culture has created what it is today. And mostly pronounced in the fact that we are really listening to a story that isn't true. And even outside of religion, we still, pay attention to the story where everybody's kind of waiting for a savior or something to save the day. And as much as we are going to have assistance, particularly from higher races as being messengers from Source itself, we, need to really understand the true message of Jesus and Magdalene, which was they were liberators, and their whole purpose was to, you know, out of it. It's like they have nothing to grab onto. They have no way to pull us in. And once that happens, and the veils on the planet lift, and we start to heal our DNA and awaken it to the real divine blueprint that has, Sophia Christ consciousness, then, we're creating global transformation. And yes, this could take till 2025 to really have paradise on Earth. But the first step is to realize the power of these manipulations and how, the Christ Sophia energy is us. It's sure there might be specific paths. I'm on a definite specific path related to this, but the whole point is it's a unified field. It's a part of our genetics, and as 95% of us have been cut off, 95% of the higher frequencies that could be coming into the planet are being cut off. So on a micro and macro level, this is what we're dealing with right now. And as much as we are dealing with this incredible manipulation and attack, it's also a reflection of how spiritually unconscious and sort of lost we all are. Because it's in our hands to make this go away. They cannot touch us once we just step into who we really are. It's just we don't feel the confidence.
Right. So I I see that you're now starting to move out now that we're in 2011. You're starting to come forward more with this information and starting to participate much more fully and bringing it out in the public. Do you think that that's part of the part of part of what's happening? Is that all of us are starting to articulate these thoughts and these insights?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both. I mean, I think there's a mirror kind of happening here. Have felt this way since for as long as I can remember. For it feels like lifetimes, and I've never really had the opportunity to share it, to talk. You're the only person. You're the first person that sort of opened the door and allowed me to walk through. And the Mars thing really wanted to sort of sabotage it and say I'm really just a voice for that part of ourselves that are all in agreement, and I'm one of many voices. But somehow, I felt, and it became clear to me, especially when some people leaked some information, that a huge part of the desire to get me onto Mars was so that I would not talk about this stuff, and that I would not share, complete my path on Earth, and that somehow, removing certain people, manipulating the masses, which they have done, puts us all in lockdown. And because I've always had a voice and because I've always been passionate about this, what I'm speaking about, because there's always been these environmental disasters, they've just taken different forms. Everything that I'm saying has been this way for a really, really, really long time. A good way to shut me up is just to drag me off the planet. So, because it was just always my intention to speak about this stuff.
Right. And now, for example, a short while ago, I was in a conference in Mallorca, Spain, and what the people were talking about then is they were looking at kind of the end result of the process that we're involved in now, that now has started accelerating in 2011. And the end result, they say, in around 2013, because time is not, a fixed quantity, but it's sort of that everyone will begin to access Christ Sophia consciousness, that God Goddess consciousness. And in 2025, it's the landing of an objective condition of paradise on earth. How would you define in your own mind each of those conditions?
Well, this is a really profound year to really begin this. First of all, 211 adds up to 4, and which is funny because we have alternative 4. Um, but this is we're preparing for this incredible shift, and this is not. We don't want to locate it all on one date, but the Venus transits that have been in play to kind of work this energy and go into the Earth and kind of draw the pentagram in the sky as it does that to reverse this inverted sort of demonic consciousness on this planet. The Venus transits and those who walk in alignment to this and who just pick up on it and emanate truth and wisdom and love that are all a part of it, are sort of creating this shift and this turnaround that is allowing the darkness to go underground where it belongs in the soil, to be composted and a part of the regenerative forces, and then the light to just be rising like flowers out of the ground and restoring the tree of life. And so 2012, this particular date, this particular time, when the alignments of Venus, Earth, and the Sun line up, this is really the cosmos saying everything's in alignment, planetarily speaking, as above, so below. So we're going to feel this incredible power and force and remembrance and awakening come in. And they're freaking out. So they're like, oh, how do we poison them more? Let's, it's just, and we just have to wait it out. It's painful to watch, but at the same time, we're dealing with multi-dimensions. We're dealing with a dream in a way. We're dealing with a reflection of ourselves in a collective level, and we're dealing with ourselves free of that, where we can share our frequencies coming from a much better place to start to affect the grid lines and activate, change, and it ripples out and it's contagious. So we just want to stay strong in that. We don't want to fall into the lower, pain body, but it's important to cry and get angry and just, be the 4 seasons and the elements and make sure that we're not repressing anything either. So, after 2012, once those forces start to come in, then we have matter, which moves a lot more slowly than spirit, and the cells of matter, have to get used to the presence of such, high frequency, that of course things are going to get shaken up. It's like a body detoxing. So we're going to deal with, the kind of disasters that are more comfortable for us. We'll feel like a relief, like, oh, I'm so glad that earthquake just happened. I feel better now. It won't be HARP. It won't be, all these other things. But then we're dealing with grid technologies. We're dealing with, this whole, these programs, these breeding programs, intense agendas that they've had for a really long time. But at the same time, as we talked about before, their technologies cannot pick up on the God consciousness. It just cannot pick up on it. And that's why after 2012, they haven't been able to pick up on anything. And so then there's threats that everything's going to be annihilated. But it's like, when you're beyond death and you know that death is not really real, and we really do fully awaken, we journey through portals rather than die, and we're already beyond technology. We just inform the matter around us to be shaped into what works, and we'll be able to pull stuff out of the sky. We're magicians, but of the highest order. They're magicians, but they're sorcerers, and they're dark, black magicians that are using dark rituals. They're feeding off of demonic entities, and it's just, it's the way its appetite works. It wants to consume. It's like a vampire, and our human bodies show the same laws. That's how cancer works. That's how disease works. That's how we're attacked. We're not protected. We are vulnerable. And so we just have to look at the larger picture in the same way that we function in our daily lives. What does it mean to have an abusive relationship? What does it mean to not eat well? What does it mean to not live your truth? And what does your body do in response to it? It freaks out. So this planet's freaking out because collectively we are just kind of like not putting two and two together. We're not understanding the relationship between DNA, the myths, the agendas, the higher, the lower races, and what, a lot of us, get it, but the point is, everything is telling a story, and when we can start to see it as a story, we're not so lost about it because it gets so complex. And, and we're never going to have all the answers. We have to surrender to the mystery at the same time, but the whole goal is to really master the journey because in doing so, we don't fall prey to these forces that are really trying to make us really smart. They're just like, come on. But, to us, we're just like, they're evil, we're victims, how could they be doing this? And, but past this point, when we past that point, and especially, being with the dolphins, which we're going to be, you and I'll just quickly mention, Andy and I, at an incredible conference for 5 to 6 days, which we will be telling the public more about, is really a chance to understand through these dolphins how to open portals and how to reaccess our multidimensional nature and to actually bring in the frequencies. I really feel that this conference is going to be a time of where we're really opening up and lifting these veils to the point where I just feel, just looking at it energetically, that something major is going to flood this planet. And the more they can be a part of this, the better. This is just such an amazing experience. And so I've done a lot of cosmic and soul journeying myself, and we have to just be comfortable with death and letting go and shedding skins and realizing that we don't have to get caught in somebody else's nightmare or destiny, or this is how they choose to play out their experience. It's something we'll split off from. There's this chance of meiosis, which chief archon alien god who, is trying to rule everything, demanded that we stop there and not look beyond who that being is. And so this, goes into myth, the tree of life and the tree of good and evil, and not to get like all into that. Ever since then, we've been sort of given this choice to sort of weave back together dualities back into unity, and spirit, and science, and spirituality and science, and all these different things that got pulled apart. We're kind of, we're fixing and weaving together. It was never permanently pulled away. It's just, like I said, that veil, the DNA, the archonic agendas, and the manipulations that have been woven in, not to mention these incredibly powerful technologies that make it almost, a part of the experience inevitably to be attacked, to be somewhat exposed to it. So the alchemy is really in those forces and how to rise above it, and realizing that something that's inferior is able to somehow capture and trap something that is much larger. But we're dealing with the physical, we're dealing with, human bodies, we're dealing with matter. And so in order for, us to really complete this process, one must see that, spirit and the physical world are inevitably going to have to face duality and weave itself back together, because the fact is, it's not consciousness anymore. It's not pure spirit. It has to look at itself. It has to sort of fall into this place of complete and total negation in order to know how to return. And so many of us never fell into that negation, but beings certainly did, and they're sort of figments of an imagination that has taken such form that they've become real, and they've, created something that feels real, but this reality is not real. All the war, all the poverty, all the suffering is not real compared to the fact that this is just a condition of, a building process. And no, it's not meant to be that all the suffering takes place. It's not the intention of the Creator, but it's the intention of a free being that's in a human experience to be exposed to both sides and determine from lifetime to lifetime what they're going to agree to and what they're going to take on if they're a part of this building of paradise on earth. And as much as there's other higher worlds and star systems that have these energies, this particular place is, very much represents where part of the goddess womb has been captured and manipulated to where everything that's generating out of it is not really the true expression of what the Creator wants, of what we really want. And unfortunately, we have some beings that do not really hold the frequency. They're inorganic beings, which I call the archons, that I was telling you about, that you're aware of course. And because they're not really organic, they can be reintegrated. They can be sort of dispelled and lose their power. But because they existed before the planetary body came about, and because they kind of cast the sort of the way that the rulership would happen here on Earth, the Sophia energy and the Christ energy said, whoa, wait a second. So Sophia morphed into the physical planet and said, I'm going to plant myself here, and I will, Sophia will feel everything that the planet feels by being the planetary body, and also embodying itself as a physical person and within all of us. And so when we connect to that part of us, we feel the planet, we feel, and so we're naturally creating alchemy because it's our body we're dealing with. It's Sophia's body, and we're all, a part of her. And so, then Christ comes and it's like, well, how to end duality, then the symbolism of the tree of life and the sacred union. And then, this archon god said, okay, well, let's mess this story up and really confuse people. And now we're here today to set the record straight and say, well, actually, this is what the story's all about. And, it's hard, and I don't want to get too wordy to explain the whys and the hows, but the point is, here we are today, and now we're piecing all this back together. And the archonic system, some consider is the God, but it's the lower God. It's not the true Creator. And so just as much as the primordial parents and the galactic core birthed Gaia, this archonic system really quickly took hold of it. And then that's when the primordial parent said, we need to figure out a way to become involved in this out of total love. Because they could have said, whoops, rough draft, whoops, big mistake, shouldn't have done, how did that happen? Big error, like the Gnostics say, this is all a big error. But love is so much more powerful than that, and it's like, when you're dealing with so many different levels of aspects and embodiments of one's own self and nature, it's all about, reintegrating and finding wholeness and getting back into balance so that all the parasitic forms and germs that come and attack anything that's out of balance the conditions of the way that, even gardens and just the cycles of nature flow. And so we're all kind of doing that when people have accidents and they lose their loved ones and they go through really dark periods. There's some level of awakening that happens, or renewal, where they're even stronger and more connected than before, and they're able to contact, they have an easier time contacting their loved ones, and of course there's visitations from higher races. And the reason there's so much secrecy about UFOs and ETs is because, first off, the negative ones would be exposed, and the positive ones that they want to keep from us would be, more accepted. And our thoughts and our energies are what allow what doorways to open and what to close. So we're taking it in our own hands. But I hope I answered that question. It's a very personal, deep soul journey. And then there's the world soul, and we're all, in our own soul journey, assisting the world soul. And, there's, a feeling that at times I've, known that I have a connection to, certain forces that I feel we're co-creating, and as it's happening to me, it's happening to you, and as it's happening to you, it's happening to me, and it's like we're all kind of mirrors, as long as we can take responsibility and say, okay, we're in this, and this is what we're doing. We're not going to put our blinders on. We're not going to be in denial. We're not going to be numb, and we're not going to not care, and we're not going to get so depressed and disconnected that we forget where this is taking us.
So what you're saying, that now we all really have to be conscious at the soul level. That we are acting at the soul level, both individually and as a collective of the human race.
Yes, because when we sort of, and this is where the manipulation also came in, when we expect, a deity or a particular being to do it for us, and then we, insult that being when they do come and try and do their work, it's like, that's not even the whole point. The point is all they represent is a part of, is that brotherhood, sisterhood of I'm this and so are you, and they're trying to make you forget. And the commitment is that certain beings don't forget, and all they do is help remind. But it doesn't mean that they're, higher or holier than thou. I mean, we're all, dealing with certain things, and we all hold different flames that other people can't hold. I mean, some people are having breakthroughs in medicine that others aren't. I mean, we all have important roles. It's the web of life of human diversity. And I'm very in touch with my particular role, but it's no more important than anybody else's. But it's been the most misunderstood, the most sort of manipulated and messed with, and it's extremely hard, and it always has been, to sort of come forth with this information without being, extremely misunderstood. So,
yeah. Now, when you say that you're in touch with your role, we used to call that upper theater, i.e., one's kind of archetypal self, which is a very positive thing, because people don't normally think about or talk about their archetypal selves in the very materialistic society that we have now. But you seem to have taken the time really to think about your archetypal self. And I wondered if you could share some of that with us.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's just kind of like a whole life thing, and I just didn't put any name to it or any identity to it. It was just like, this is what I do, and this is what I have to do, and it was just sort of this alchemy that I'm talking about, just kind of being plunged into an incredible amount of darkness, but knowing what I have to do, and knowing that all the different forces that I'm facing in order to retrieve a part of me from them that they have tried to take or tried to rob, or, in a larger way. And so, I was like, wow, this, after about 10 years, I was like, this is really intense. And I mean, way beyond that. It's like I was kind of journeying out of my body and going through all these different dimensional things and clearing these portals from all this inorganic stuff. And I was like, okay, well, this is just my happy imagination. But then I started getting readings, and people would be like, oh, yeah, this is what you're doing. I'm like, I can't believe that, I'm starting to actually get, confirmation. And it wasn't like somebody was telling me something and it was like new news to me. It was like, wow, this person's actually seeing me. And then I, came across a lot of books and got into understanding my chart and just got, unbelievable amounts of information from sources all the time without asking for it, that confirmed everything that I was going through. Once I had reached a certain level and gotten over a certain hump, and it was clear how devoted I was and how much nothing was going to stop me. And my tarot deck has been crucial. If I, literally, even to this day, if I don't know where my cards are, I'm like, oh my God, because that's
Right.
like my language. Like
Right.
I can't, like every day, like, where are my cards? Like,
Right.
kids, go find my card. And it's like, it's the language I speak. It's like, it's not about the future so much. It's about, you know, just staying with it and just going in the flow of it and understanding it. And everybody is made up of these archetypal forces. They all exist within. And so, you know, I'm only in touch with something that, you know, everybody is living as well. They just might not be as, you know, over the top about it, but it's like, it's a life or death thing. I mean, it really is. And so when I sort of was in denial or just like, oh, well, that's all just like, you know, how am I ever going to talk about that? What are people going to make of this? You know, it was like something was just like, it's like life or death. You have to. And people would say, you have to. And so I was like, you know, I know, but and I do know that I'll word it in a way that's understandable, that will help relieve all these different sort of projections that have really made us all lost from what it's really all about. So you know, I'm just kind of representing, like I've told you before, a unified field, just sort of being transparent to this Mother Earth, not really, you know, having Laura as an identity that has, you know, certain things that, you know, I want for me. It's like I just kind of dissolved into just something that I really want for all. It's like there's no me. It's like I just see me as all. You know, it's like what I fight for is not for myself. It's for you know the human race, and it's just my heart's completely open to the whole experience and the whole of creation, and ready to forgive all those that have, you know, harmed. But yeah, so I think it's more just about dissolution and about just, you know, letting all, just to feel all the forces, you know, so that if I can feel it all and be in touch with it all, then I can really find balance. It's not just about my personal balance of going to work and eating well. It's balance on cosmic and global underworld, you know, levels. So it of course rattles me to the core, but you know, I see that, you know, this is something a lot of us have taken on. So right now my goal is to really just share and what this means and to keep the dialogue open and so that we can feel like we're supporting one another, because I know I'm not alone. And it's ever since, you know, I met, you know, you and Andy and so many other people, it's just like, you know, it's so wonderful to know that, you know, people are functioning on that kind of deep level too. And we want to help people not be afraid of it, because it's the key to our freedom. Doesn't mean we all have to, you know, go into hell. And I mean, we are kind of in hell here, but that's just that part of our DNA. That's just part of our experience. That's just part of what it means to live underneath this veil. But it is nothing. It's just nothing compared to what we truly are and what we all know we are. And that's why we have mood swings. That's why we have, you know, incredible problems sometimes, because we're longing for that reality to come back. If we didn't care, we wouldn't notice. We'd be like, oh, that's nice.
Yeah. Now, you've spent some substantial part of your life in countries outside of the U.S., I think, right?
Not
Not,
a terribly long
no,
amount of
no,
time,
no,
but
no, no
most,
time.
yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, and now in this coming year, you're going to be participating in events that are outside of the U.S. I know that you'll be coming down to Mexico for a few events in the area of cosmic consciousness. Uh, how do you see countries other than the U.S. in terms of this transformational process?
Well, you know, I think America is probably one of the worst. You know, people that are really in touch with their culture, that have, you know, kept the roads the way they were back in, you know, uh, I mean, just have a deeper sense of, you know, there's a sense of family and community, and you know, anybody that's, you know, struggling in survival just usually has a deep kind of sense of love and spirituality, because they don't take things for granted. Whereas in America, we're dealing with the duality of the rich and then the poor, and I'm not saying that's not the same all over the world, but there's a little bit more humility in other countries and a little bit more receptivity, I would say, in certain countries. And then you got other ones where, you know, England has a lot of that, but at the same time, it's one of the worst when it comes to just being infiltrated with this sort of manipulation and these kind of technologies and these large AI computers. You know, they're, you know, spread throughout the world, and you know, these things are trying to take over. So it kind of depends on the individual, but you know, I think people are really receptive because they hold a lot of historical information. You know, you go to Greece, or you go to Delphi, or you go to Glastonbury, and, you know, different sacred places that are, you know, near places that have a lot of historical significance as far as, you know, history of the way things were before it just has been taken over. People just long for this, and people from all over the world have written me and just are just so receptive to it and really understand it, and live near those places and just say, I grew up around this, and I can't believe you're talking about this stuff, and I'm gonna say, oh, but I used to live over there too, and they're like, oh, okay, so you're not that far from it. So I guess my point is, I think America is probably one of the toughest, dealing with this American government, and but it's infected, so much, just as the Nazi Party has infected us, and it's each place has a little bit of it, but I just think when you're really dealing with the people, especially people who really care about their families and they're a lot more humble, they're a lot more reachable.
Yeah. Now, there's sort of two areas I'm kind of one area is just briefly for those who might not know, and then I'd like to talk about the positive timeline versus the catastrophic timeline, because that's a subject that we've been really talking about, and that's something I think people should really think about. But just very, very briefly, you really were almost targeted by the national security state almost before you were born, because you were identified by quantum access time travel. And you talk about almost from the age of 7 or so, growing up within the Eisenhower family, feeling that you were inside of this matrix, really being looked at in a special way. And I wanted to just briefly, you could share some of that, so people know the kind of struggle that and the kind of experience that you've had as you've gone through your life journey.
Yeah, no, it's been really weird to find that kind of stuff out, but then it never surprised me. And when the Mars thing came along, it didn't surprise me either, because I felt, why is this not happening? There's something weird happening to me that isn't happening to my sisters or my cousins, and there's some sort of attention on me, but it's kind of helping me, but it's not helping me. It's like tripping me up, and it's throwing me off, and it's throwing me into places that I didn't really want to go. And at the same time, I was being prepared. I was being prepared by, guides and beings and aeons, messengers, higher races in a sense in my dreams. And in reality, when I was a child, just, hold on to this and hold on to this truth. This one, bunch of beings, very luminous, gave me a viewfinder, and they said, look through this. This is what the future can be. This is what you can create. And it was about the positive timeline. They said, it'll be so beautiful, it'll make you cry. And it was like, well, the whole path is freaking made me cry. I'm glad it's going to be happy tears. So, that was in my awareness before I really caught up with the fact that there's information coming later where people, oh yeah, well, we knew about you before you were born. And then, documentations were handed to me that related to the more archetypal, esoteric part of it that had described me physically, and I still have that documentation. And, how she's drowning in her humanness, but she represents, just the Sophia energies, or like I like to say I'm a vessel for it. No, nobody can claim this as an identity because it's universal. It's really available to all. But, there's this devotion to carving something with it in the physical world. And so, when these bits of information came at me on one level from coming from a political family and, maybe, an influence I might have in the world someday, and then, how it kind of connects to this sort of more mythological, esoterical thing, it was, a huge relief, but at the same time, just kind of feeling like, what is all this attention on me? Because, I feel, obviously I'm, a normal person who, but it was, a lot of it was soul annihilation, and a lot of it was tracing back through past lives, all the way back to the sort of things that I'm talking about, and these levels of manipulation. So a lot of it was just, for, on a daily level for, I would say about 15, 20 years, trying to stay alive. And it was not just because of the people in my life. It wasn't just because of the targets and maybe the attacks and the technologies that they used, but it was some level of, suffocation, and just, it was so intense that, I wrote a book about it. And it took me out for about 20 years. The whole goal was, to try and get him to my physical body, which I couldn't do. There seemed to be so much attention on it, or so much attack, that I just, couldn't leave, but I didn't let anything take it over. I just let, maybe this much of me run it. But, while I was trying to go to school and trying to work and trying to relate to my family, it was like, this isn't going to make sense to anybody, so I'll just deal with it. I know what I'm doing, I will deal with it. It was like, I had done it before. It was like, And then, when I read about Inanna going through the 7 gateways of hell and how it relates to the planet Venus, and then I see 7 Plutos and 7 Venuses in my astro chart, and I'm seeing like all these myths and stories, I'm like, oh my God, that's like exactly what is going on. And the fact that, people are sort of discovering me before I am even born, and even the aviary people said that even Ike was told. They were gonna hook up that night. So I guess, if people are saying they knew me before I was born.
Now, uh, finally, because we have about 10 minutes left in our conversation, and this time has really gone by quickly. Um, the positive timeline, that is one of the most single powerful realizations that I personally have had, I know, in my life, realizing that there is a positive timeline. And I can credit you with bringing that realization to me. It's something that I had at the intuitive level, but until you articulated it, and then I went out and said, well, let me find out about it. And I actually researched it, and I wrote a couple of articles in which, yeah, there's a positive timeline and there's a catastrophic timeline. So I want to thank you for like crystallizing that in my own mind. And,
Oh.
and yeah. And
well,
so
without you, I don't think I would be on the positive timeline because, it's just kind of like we're kind of our sabotaging minds. We do this, and we can catch ourselves and be like, wait a second, that was negative. Wait a